Raise your hand if you like to be validated. Yeah, yep. I thought so. We all love a bit of validation, right? And we live in a society that basically tells us that, if it's not getting tons of likes on the gram and TikTok and whatever, or if you're not making money off of it, that it's not real, that it's not valuable, that it's, useless, really. That your skills, your abilities, if it only serves you, that it's basically useless. And that's obviously not true. We know that it's not true, but somehow we have gotten to this point, where we are constantly chasing this dopamine high of, oh yeah, validation. And that's a crazy trap to find yourself in. Like crazy, because if your sense of self is predicated on what other people tell you about yourself, you never take the time to learn about yourself for yourself, to have your own definition of yourself, to have your own experience of yourself, right? You never even really learn, especially because this is something that is taught to us so young. We're never taught to consider and to create a relationship with ourselves. Who am I to me, right? What values do I value, right? What personality traits do I want to have? Instead, we become a collection of what other people enjoy about us, right? That most people tend to compliment us on our sense of humor. So we feel the need to inject humor into all our interactions because that guarantees being liked, right? That guarantees our access to this dopamine high that we're seeking, right? We're all fiends for this validation. And as any addict can tell you, it gets dangerous really fast. Really fast. And you find yourself doing ridiculous things, contorting yourself in all sorts of ways just for your next fix. And you destroy yourself in the process. And that is what we're all basically doing. I think to some extent, especially if you're not conscientiously operating in this world, it becomes so quick and easy, and you kind of like fall into this trap of self-abandonment. You abandon yourself, you forget yourself, and you kind of just exist within the confines of other people's imagination, other people's desires of you. Now, we've had this conversation before about, not existing within the confines of another person's imagination. But what I'd like us to really discuss today is the harm of defining yourself by what other people tell you you are. And an example I'd like to use is something that happens a lot in relationships. You might find yourself befriending someone and you think that they're a really close friend and you love them and they love you, and just you guys go together like peanut butter and jam. And then this person tells you, like, oh, girl, you're not good at that. Like, I don't think you should try. Like, you're really bad at it low key. Like, I don't think that you should do that. You know what I mean? And you take the advice to heart. So you stop doing said thing, or you don't pursue that business venture, or you know what I mean? You make a pivot and you try something else. And they're like, how about this? This is what you're really good at, right? Or even if it isn't really a close friend, but like the people around you, they keep sort of steering you in a particular direction and discouraging you from pursuing this other thing, that's on your mind. And of course, you need to listen to wise counsel, and the people who care about you are just trying to help and da 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 da. The danger in not having a clear definition of who you are and what you want, and being able to have a solid relationship with yourself before prioritizing your relationships with other people and the validation, like external validation, right? The danger of that is that there are some people who know exactly how amazing you are, especially when you have a low self-esteem, right? They know exactly how amazing you are, that if you pursued this thing, that you would actually flourish at it. And you might flourish to the point where you might surpass them, right? That your light shines brighter than theirs, or at least in their perception of things, right? That they see you as full of so much life that it intimidates them in some way. So they leverage their relationship with you, right, and their influence over you because of your low self-esteem, because of your poor sense of self, and your non-existent relationship with yourself. They then insert themselves and they become that voice. They fill that void and then convince you that you are less than what you are. And the danger of that then becomes that you then end up existing and start believing these things that they're saying and start existing in that way, letting go of the things that you wanted to pursue, letting go of your passions and all these other things. And it's dangerous because if you actually took a step back, right? If you took a step back and you actually observe how they interact with you, right? They keep you thinking small. They keep you believing that you're small, but they also exploit you for everything that you've got. It's not enough for them to snuff out your light, right? They just want the light to shine on them. They just want the light to keep them warm and no one else, right? So they'll still keep coming to you for advice. They'll still keep, let's say, for example, you want to start like a seamstress business where you make like, I don't know, handmade, personalized couture boutique outfits. I don't know. You know what I mean? But that's your dream. That's what you want to do. You want to be a fashion designer. You want to have your own line. You want to be able to make clothes for people with, non-conventional bodies, fashion for people with disabilities, whatever, right? And they tell you like, oh, girl, do you even have like the business acumen to be able to pull off such a thing? And like, yeah, you're good at sewing, but like, I mean, all your designs are pretty basic and like there's nothing new under the sun. Like, what the fuck are you going to add to the scene? And like in this economy also, do you get what I mean? And they come in with like all these other things. And this is your friend. They love you. They care about you. This is your partner, right? This is your mother. This is your sibling. You know what I mean? The person who's supposed to love you most in the world. So if they're saying this, like they obviously just, they don't want you to fail, and they see failure down the road for you because they know you. They know you so well. They know you better than you know yourself, remember? Because you never took the time to know yourself. So you're relying on their information to fill in the gaps. So they tell you that you're going to fail, that you're not good enough, and you believe them, and you proceed accordingly. But at the same time, every time they want an outfit made for an event, they'll come to you. At the same time, every time they want an outfit repaired, they come to you. Right? You become their personal seamstress instead of pursuing your own dreams. Have you ever noticed? Have you ever seen stuff like that happen? Maybe not personally, but even in your observations of other people's relationships, that they will milk your life source dry and convince you that you never had a wellspring to begin with, right? While still drinking from it. Isn't that strange? Doesn't that show, perhaps in their actions, that they knew exactly how amazing you are, but put time and effort into convincing you otherwise, so that you don't surpass them, so that you stay in your place. Because how dare you dream? How dare you consider yourself more than what you are right now? How dare you reach for a higher station in life than what they think you deserve? Higher than what they think they can achieve? And instead of confronting their own failings in life, instead of pursuing a passion or an interest that could also take them to the same level, instead of being inspired to also reach the same heights, they choose their love of misery and choose you as their their chosen company in that misery. And you fall for it, hook, line, and sinker, because you don't know yourself. Now, this idea might seem a little abstract for you, so let's put our tinfoil hats on, because you know I love a good tinfoil hat moment. But let's put those hats on for a second. And let me give you, I don't want to say like a universal example, but a global example of how the same thing happens. Let's look at Black people, for example. Black people across the world, really, in any country, continent, space. Now, we know African countries were colonized, right? Black people were taken as slaves or cheap labor, right? Oppressed by their white overlords. And in that dynamic, right, with the white people in power and the Black people being subjugated, the narrative from the whites, or the narrative from the colonizer, was that, you know, Black people are filthy, Black people are lazy, Black people are stupid, right? That Black people are incapable of reaching success of any kind. And the best way to convince Black people of that, right, was in step one of the colonial project. And step one of the colonial project is to divorce the Black person from their history, from their community, from their culture, from their sense of self, right? Destabilize them and pluck them from their roots. Yeah? Because once you no longer have an identity, you're going to seek out from your outside world that information. You want to plant yourself somewhere. You need something to stabilize you. And once the white man, the colonizer, has successfully destabilized, you know, the people that they're choosing to subjugate, then they replace the history and that sense of self that's been lost. They replace it with their own narrative, that they're less than human, that they're worth nothing, and that all they are is whatever use white people can find them for, that they should just be grateful, right? That at least, you know, if something we hear a lot in South Africa, you know, South Africa would have all this technology and all this structure and all this. If it wasn't for the whites, you bitches would have never figured this shit out, right? And the funny thing about that is that if white people or let's not say, I keep saying white people, but if colonizers really and truly believed that black people were incapable of achieving great things on their own, and that the only reason why we are quote unquote civilized is because of them, they would not have put so much effort into keeping us away from information, limiting our access to spaces. They would not have spent so much time policing us. If they really and truly believed that we were just dimwits, right? These little Neanderthal knuckle dragging individuals with pea-sized brains, there would be no need to police us as much as they did. There would be no need to have a concerted effort into controlling every aspect of our lives to make sure that we do not, even for a second, see that we are capable of more than anything. If black people are so filthy, why bring them into your homes to clean for you? If black people are so lazy, how have you managed to build the industries that you've built? How have you managed to create all of this with black labor? Right? White people, the colonizers weren't in the mines. The colonizers aren't in the farms, right? It's the black people they chose. And then they say, oh, well, this is all you're good for. You're just good for this, right? But that's hard work that you yourself as a colonizer are unwilling to do. Do you get what I mean? So if anything, are they not projecting their own insecurities onto us? Because they knew what they were dealing with. They could see our potential as people. And that if we ever figured out as a collective that, hey, we're being shy-shied here. We are being shy-shied. These bitches ain't got nothing on us. Let's turn the tables. They knew they'd be fucked royally. So they had to spend every second of their lives trying to keep us from the knowledge of ourselves and our true potential, because that would be a threat to them. Right? You see this in America, where in Tulsa, I think it's Tulsa, Alabama, where there was that Black Wall Street and poor whites burnt that place to the ground. So are we going to say that black people are not enterprising, that they're not smart, that they're not capable of success and achieving great feats when they were standing right next to their white counterparts who failed to achieve the same things in the same space with the same resources, if anything, less resources to start off with, and still managed to create the amazing community that they created of wealthy black people? You look at Burkina Faso and Thomas Sankara. I'll never shut up about Thomas Sankara, because the whole Western world has us convinced that the African continent is a, developing nation. It's third world. You know what I mean? These bitches don't know how to run a country on their own. They've infantilized us, right? And we've bought into it, right? Our presidents go into UN meetings, on bended knee, begging for assistance, begging for help. Oh my gosh, we could never fix our own problems. Oh, daddy, please. What the hell? What the hell? We're on land that is rich in resources. We have strong, capable, smart people. How is it that in the best hospitals in the world, the doctors are not locals? The doctors are people from Africa. Remember that homegirl who glued her hair down, and she's like, oh, my hair, it won't move. And she used actual like carpenters or like woodworkers, or what is it called, construction worker gorilla glue instead of the hair product. Who was that amazing doctor that sorted her out? It wasn't a guy from an African country. I think it was Nigerian or something like that. My point is, all these people, all these skilled, amazing, smart people, they're going around the world being successful in other countries because that's what we believe. That's what we believe about ourselves. That success can only be achieved in other countries because success doesn't exist where we are right now. It can't be. And that's what was so beautiful about what Thomas Sankara did with his country for the short time that he had control over it. He was able to prove to the world and to his people that we do not need outside help. This was a landlocked country that was dry and had very little resources, little to none. And they still managed to work towards being self-sufficient. So much so that it was a threat. And a European country, I keep confusing whether it was the French or Italians, paid his best friend to assassinate him. How? How does it make sense that the African continent, that people on the African continent, and that African leaders are incapable of running their own countries, that we do not have the tools, the skills, or the knowledge to succeed on our own, and that our very survival is dependent on the Western counterparts? How? How is that true if when one person tried to do it, they were fucking assassinated? Tell me you think I'm that bitch without telling me I'm that bitch. Q sniper. Like, come on, come on. If they really and truly thought that Africans are just these dumbass third world, what did Trump say? I don't know what the hell he said, but whatever dumbass shit Trump said. If they really thought that of us, whatever the fuck Thomas Sankara was doing wouldn't have bothered them in the slightest. Because those buffoons, just let them fucking fail on their own. And I know I'm swearing a lot, apologies. But, let those idiots do whatever they want. They're never going to succeed anyway because they're idiots, right? If you really and truly believe that, they wouldn't have taken the time, the effort, or the energy to do that. To kill him, to get him assassinated. Why? Why? Because they knew that if he succeeded, his message would spread. Other African nations would start to see what he had achieved. And even if the presidents of the neighboring countries were still in the pockets of the Western world, the people of those nations would revolt and say, I want what those bitches are having. Do you get what I mean? And they couldn't have that. They couldn't have that at all because they know how amazing we are as people. They know our strength. They know our power. They know our value. And they know that they could never match us if we were ever equally, facing each other. If we are not equally matched, that we surpass them by leaps and bounds. Have the whole world thinking that Galileo was the father of astronomy and whatever, when there's proof that Africans were studying the stars and had figured shit out ages ago, before Galileo's grandfather was still a twinkle in his father's eye. Like, but no. Instead, when they find proof of that on the African continent, then for them it's just proof of aliens, right? There's that meme of that crazy guy from the History Channel with his hair all over the place. That, okay, I was about to swear again. I'm trying to keep it to a minimum. But that guy was literally sitting there trying to connect the dots on how the aliens must have built the pyramids, because I mean, each block must have weighed a million gajillion kilograms. There's no way people could figure out how to pick that up. Not, at that time. What do you mean? Does that not mean that perhaps these people had advanced technology? They had figured out a way to do it, either using manpower or some sort of pulley system or whatever, but that they figured it out. But because they managed to figure it out eons before you bitches even figured out how to write on pen and paper, that there's no way, not the Africans, those buffoons must be aliens. The level of mental gymnastics they have to put themselves through to explain away our very obvious and very evident brilliance should be a bit of a sign that maybe these bitches are not operating with the full deck. That there's a level of insanity that needs to come into play here for them to honestly believe the bullshit that they've been trying to sell. And low-key, we are buying it. We fall for it every time. And maybe not we as individuals, but we as a collective, because look at the state of our countries. Look at the state of the African continent. There's the president of Congo trying to invite Americans and actively openly begging Americans to come in, to invest, more outsiders, to pillage the country. Because what? Instead of figuring out a way of investing in his own people, and first of all, stopping the Americans from dropping guns off and, all of that, but that's a chat for another day. Point is, right, the Western world has a vested interest in keeping the African continent unstable. They invest in the wars that happen on this continent, because it keeps us destabilized. It keeps us from connecting with each other and being rooted and having our own identity within ourselves without relying on external validation. They invest in these wars so that we can remain dependent on them, so that they can stay in control of the narrative, so that they can have complete power. Because their power is dependent on our lack of self, right? Our diminished sense of self is what keeps them in power. Am I making sense? Are we putting two and two together here? Now, on a global scale, getting involved in, active citizenship and all of these extra things, I think is a duty for all of us to try and educate the young, educate each other, be more conscientious, divest in things that do not uplift Black people, that do not connect Black people, that do not, share knowledge of empowerment and all of these things, right? Because more often than not, we're taught to believe that our history starts with colonization. And it's understandable to believe that, because a lot of our historical texts were stolen, right? And we're told to believe that, like, oh, we only did oral history, so like we were the dumbasses to not come up with like a better system, with like backups and hard drives and whatever, when our literal hard drives and backups were stolen, smashed, and are sitting in some British museum somewhere, not even in the correct order. Like, what a hell. And they're not going to acknowledge that, and they're just going to keep singing the song of, well, you bitches never had a good system. You bitches don't have a history anyway, that you never existed until white people laid eyes on you, and that until then you were just what? Standing around? Waiting? Like, come on, come on. Now, before I get riled up, because, oh, damn, does this piss me off, I am going to circle back to those personal relationships. Now that, I've laid it out for you step by step, right? It's a lot easier to see in that political context how these things happen. But the same thing happens between individuals. The same thing happens in your intimate relationships. Not everyone who is in your circle is in your corner. And I know we've had a conversation about, people who are in the corner of your circle. I have a few friends who I know for damn sure that they're in the corner of my circle, right? But really and truly take stock of the people in your life. And having considered sort of the examples that I put in place today, right? People who don't encourage your dreams, who are quick to sort of shoot your ideas down, even if they have valid concerns, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your ideas challenged, right? But there's a difference between being challenged and being discouraged and dismissed. And you need to know the difference. Now, instead of trying to turn into Sherlock Holmes and be a detective and again look out and see, oh, what's going on, in the world, because I need to find the right people to validate me. That's not the solution here. I just mean, as a general rule of thumb, you don't want to have haters in your camp. Yes, in every 12 has a Judas, sure. But the best way to sniff them out is to have a good relationship with yourself. To invest in a relationship with yourself to the point where you can just know that, listen, like, I'm actually really good at this thing. I know I am because I say I am. Like, I've seen myself do ABC. I've seen myself achieve ABC. That even when no one else was looking, I went from here to here. And if I'm capable of making this leap, I don't see how it's impossible for me to go from where I am now and further and beyond. Because I know exactly where I started from. And I dragged myself here. I achieved that because I supported myself. I backed myself up, right? I invested in myself. I encouraged myself because I'm just that type of person. I'm hardworking. I'm smart. I'm capable. I'm creative. I'm hilarious. I'm caring. I'm this. I'm that. I know these things because I am these things to myself first. That all my skills, all my resources, I pour them into myself. That my cup is full constantly. That I operate from a place of fullness. And that whatever you experience of me is just from the overflow of my internal fullness. And that what you get to partake in is what I am willing to share and not what I am sacrificing for the sake of this relationship. Then that becomes so much easier for you to Filter out bullshit, because now the people who require you to abandon yourself in order for you to maintain the relationship, they have no room in your life. They get snuffed out quite quickly because you're just like, nah, ho. I'm telling you that this is all I have to offer. I know I'm hilarious. Do I owe you a joke? No. I don't owe you anything, right? Yes, some days you might encounter me and we share a laugh and you walk away feeling lighter. Sure. But other days I have deep thoughts. I have concerns about the world and I want to share that. And if you're going to tell me that there's no room in our relationship for me to be a full human being, for me to be multidimensional, because I know that, bitch, I'm a kaleidoscope of a human being, and all you want is jokey jokes, hire a clown, ho. Hire a clown. Because it's not going to be me. Because I'm more than that. And that's not how I want to interact in the world. Because I am full and I want to be received in my fullness. Do you get what I mean? That's it. That's it. That's it. And then everything else becomes a lot easier to manage. Then you can discern the difference between dismissal and constructive criticism, because you know you're not going to dismiss yourself. You know you're not going to throw yourself away. You're not going to abandon yourself. So anyone who seeks to do that, you're going to be like, well, that's clearly not the information that I need. Thanks anyway. But I think I'm going to go elsewhere. Do you get what I mean? Because we definitely have those people in our lives, or we've met people who are just consistently negative, who bring down the energy, of any situation. That just everything has to be a sob story. Everything is followed up by a tragic story of someone else who tried the same thing and now, they're homeless and what and what and what. So what? I mean, that sucks for them, I guess. But I believe in my resilience and resourcefulness, and that even if this doesn't work out, there's something to be learned from this. And I have a history of bouncing back from failure, right? I've seen myself and I've supported myself through that. Now, again, I'm not promoting, self-isolation and being like super independent. As people, we need each other. We need a community, because sometimes we do need someone to pour into us, right? In the same way that we pour into others. But again, operating from that secure sense of self, you'll be able to also clearly identify what your needs are in that moment and communicate that clearly to the people in your life. That oftentimes the reason why our relationships fall apart, it's not because either person has ill intention or is operating in bad faith, but because we don't even have clearly defined expectations. We do not even know what our own needs are, and we're expecting this person to just be our everything. And in them failing to do and be that, we consider them as a failure entirely. But if you can't even see yourself as multifaceted, how are you able to see other people as multifaceted? If you yourself don't even know what's wrong with you, what do you need, but you expect other people to show up for you, how? You expect them to smell? They must just guess? They must just know? No. If you have a clear and full understanding of yourself and acceptance of yourself, there'll also be no fear in advocating for yourself. When you say, listen, I need some time. I need to take a step back and just refuel. Or, babes, I'm having a tough moment. I just need you to hold me. Or, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I need a distraction. You know what I mean? Do you want to do something fun? Just take my mind off things. I'd really appreciate it. I don't want to address this issue right now. Or Friend, are you in a position to chat? I really want to have a deep chat with you, right? And if you know, right, if you've taken the time to now figure out and discern who is in the corner of your circle, it's easy for you to know that I can show up as my full self. That sometimes I'm the jokey joke, sometimes I'm the therapist, sometimes I'm the patient, sometimes I'm the doctor, sometimes I'm the dad friend, sometimes I'm whatever, because I have all of that within me. And I accept and love all of those parts of myself. And that, my friend understands and accepts all of those parts of me as well. My lover, my friend, my sister, my neighbor, whoever that person is, right? They see me and they accept me, so I can show up, right, and ask. And even if they don't have the capacity to do so, my ask was clear, right? And therefore their answer can be clear. And I can move on, right? And find another way to have that need met without it feeling like some sort of deep betrayal, because you know that if you were in the same position and could not meet that need, that you have that secure relationship with yourself and your friends, that you don't feel like the relationship is now in jeopardy because you could not meet the need. Do you get what I mean? Because a lot of times our relationships with other people are service based. That if they no longer need me for something, they won't want me around. The only reason why they want me is because I serve a purpose, right? I have a function. And if I'm no longer doing my function, they'll discard me. Whereas the people who actually care about you, they see your value outside of what they can get out of you. Do you get what I mean? And they understand that some days you just can't, you know? But they know that at your core you are a good friend. And that when you can, you will, right? And vice versa. But all of this stems from you being secure within yourself. Because if everything in your life is dependent on external validation, then everything is life or death. That if you can't please the next person, then who are you, what are you, and can you even live this life? Because again, going back to tinfoil hat mode, that's what the capitalist system requires of us, right? It requires us to constantly be dependent on other people and other systems for our survival. Your job is a perfect example of that, right? If your boss is not pleased with your work, whether you think you did a good job or not, that's not the point. The other person needs to think you did a good job. And we've all had bad managers who are asking you to do something that is so counterproductive, and you think that there's a better way to do it, and there's proof that your way is better, but your hard-headed manager wants it done in a particular way, regardless of whether it's the most efficient way or not. They want it that way. And because of that, you will be graded based on that person's rubric. And your job security is dependent on that. So you end up going the long way around. You end up constantly frustrated, irritated, upset, angry, getting home drained because all you had to do is perform, juck and jive. Why? Because if you stop tap dancing, bitch, you're gonna starve. You're gonna die. And the capitalist model has been transplanted in every factor, every facet of our lives. Where if you're not jucking and jiving for someone, your existence is put into jeopardy. And like, how is that even a way to live? So, yes, you can't always, it's not necessarily something that's productive right in the workplace to say like, I know me and I know my value and like, fuck you. But at the same time, yeah, once you are operating in that secure sense of self, right, and trust in your ability to recover, your resourcefulness, right, you might then be able to approach your job with less anxiety because you know that, listen, I want to do a good job and I have a good work ethic, right? And I just want to help improve this organization, right? And whatever. Like, if you don't have a good work ethic and you know that, like, oh, I'm phoning it in, whatever, cool. But you know yourself and you're just like, I don't need this job. I know that I can get another job elsewhere. Or I know that I can set up a side hustle and support myself for some time. I know that I have the skills within me to survive this. I have the support. I have whatever, right? That I'm secure as I am, that I can survive whatever comes from this situation. I'm not going to kill myself for this. Like, not at all. That this thing in particular is not worth the personal sacrifice. That you can then make that assessment and decide for yourself what you're willing to sacrifice yourself for and what you're not. But it requires a secure sense of self. And yes, you know, in the larger scheme of things, it also requires financial security and, right? But again, a lot of these issues that we have with money, a lot of these issues that we have with our relationship to these external things stems from our internal environment. And once we can get a better handle on that, and I'm not saying be perfect, right? But by being able to acknowledge, understand, and accept yourself as you are and say, okay, cool, like, I'm working on this thing. This definitely needs improvement. I don't like ABC about myself and I'm working on fixing that. Cool. But you accept yourself for that, right? So if anyone else comes in and tries and tune you shit about it, you'd be like, okay, and you know what I mean? That there isn't shame attached to the fact that you're not good at something or that you're whatever. You can be like, yeah, you know, you're right. It is something I've been struggling with for some time and I'm working on it. You know what I mean? I appreciate you noticing that. And, you know, I'm assuming that you're operating from a sense of like care and concern, perhaps. So I'd just like to reassure you that, like, I'm aware of it and I'm working on it, and I'd appreciate your patience. You know, and I appreciate this feedback because now I can see that, like, it's showing up in this area. Do you get what I mean? You immediately have the power to shift the tone of that conversation, even if it came in a malicious way. Because you've accepted yourself, the malice has nowhere to land. And you then take control of the tone and the narrative of that conversation. You're like, yeah, like, I really appreciate that feedback. It is something that I'm aware of, right? And it is something that I'm actively working on, you know, whatever. And depending on the dynamic that you have with that person, you maybe owe them an explanation or you don't, and be like, cool, thanks, noted, right? But at the end of the day, it doesn't affect you as much because you know yourself. You know that this is an issue. Or maybe they mention something that you've never been aware of. Again, you take it in and be like, okay, cool. Like, you know, I'm going to think about this later and see how true is this of me, or is this just like the other person just expressing their own bullshit? You know what I mean? Getting some frustration off their chest. Then you think about it and you're like, no, you know, you calling me selfish is not true because I know myself and I know how I operate in the world and I'm far from selfish. So, yeah, you're just mad that you didn't get your way, and I'm not going to fall for that manipulation. Like, I'm Gucci. Do you feel me? Instead of going through some sort of doom spiral, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I really a selfish person? Like, am I really that terrible? Like, am I that? And the reason why I'm saying all of this is because I've had interactions like that in the past, where people that I respected, and even just random strangers really, have said something to my face about me, right? I remember once being called like judgy. I'm super judgmental and like such a bitch, and like this is why people don't like really want to, you know, do things around me or like invite me to things because I'm just going to judge them and I think I'm better than them and da 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 da. And because like I don't have, not don't, but like at the time I had a terrible, sense of self and self-worth and all of those things, it shook me to my core. It shook me to my core because, I mean, as a people pleaser, like what the hell? What the hell? Someone is displeased that all of you have been secretly harboring hate. Like, oh my gosh, that I've just been like hurting everyone. Like, oh my gosh. But like, I sat with that shit for a long time and it upset me so much. But like now, the same person like tried to sort of reiterate the same point, like maybe like a year later, right? And like bring it up. And I was just like, you know what? Yeah, I do be judging. I do be judging. And I mean, have you seen yourself though? But like I'm not malicious about it. I definitely don't think that I'm better than everyone. You know what I mean? I question like your life choices and I'm curious about what motivates some of your behavior, which definitely could come across as judgmental if it's something that you're not particularly comfortable with, right? But my questions, my observations do not come from a malicious place. I genuinely want to know because I know that I'm a curious person. I'm curious about the world. I'm really observant and I notice the smallest, dumbest things. And sometimes they entertain me because I imagine a whole narrative around that little thing that might not even be true at all. But that little narrative and my curiosity paired with my creativity makes for a wonderful little story, and I start laughing. Am I judging you? No. None of this has anything to do with you. I'm just amused by my own imagination. You know what I mean? But my amusement aside, what is the true story behind this thing? You know what I mean? But I also understand how it might be perceived by others and how it might be received. So I have adjusted how I interact with other people, especially strangers, but my close friends and the people who know and understand, the people who are in the corner of my circle, they know me well enough to know that I'm not a malicious person. So I can be more like blunt and just like, oh, girl. Since when did you have a snaggle tooth? Okay, I'm not that bad, but like, do you get what I mean? So accepting that part of myself enough to understand that it might not be received well by others, it might not be liked by everyone, but it's a part of myself that I like and it's not something I'm willing to chop off for the benefit of others, right? But it required accepting myself. It required first knowing that about myself, deciding whether it's something I wanted to change or not, right? Accepting it regardless of the outcome, right? Regardless of whether I'm going to keep it or, work to change or whatever. But the point of it all being that I had to sort of accept myself first. Mind you, the person who was giving me this feedback was someone who was in a position of power over me. So the dynamic also kind of spoke to my survival in that space, right? Do I chop this part off for the sake of surviving in this space because this person holds so much power? Or am I going to remain true to who I am and they either take me or leave me? And because I understand that I'm taking this risk, let me then prepare for contingencies because what I am is a bitch who's prepared. Do you get what I mean? So now I take that information, I take that feedback as information that, like, okay, cool. I'm not entirely secure in this space, right? Because there are parts about my personality that are not being received well here. And I'm not going to stop asking questions because I know that it is important for everybody's growth and everybody's like understanding and all of that. I know that this part of my personality serves a function. not just to myself, but to society as a whole. And it's not something that I'm going to stop because you're uncomfortable with it, because that also maybe speaks to the fact that there's something you want to hide, which is why you don't like the fact that I observe and follow up with questions, whereas other people observe and could observe you falling into a pit and not say anything. But that's not the person that I am, right? So if that's not going to be appreciated in this space, let me come up with contingencies, right? He might take a second to adjust, right? And if he is unwilling or unable to adjust, I need to be able to take care of me. But instead, what we end up doing is chopping off parts of ourselves and holding on to this thing for dear life, instead of having our internal source of validation so that we can pivot when necessary. And that's all I want for all of us. I'm not completely there yet. I too struggle with the same thing, which is why I'm bringing it up today. Right? And mind you, to sort of close off that little loop, that person is no longer a factor. I didn't have to come up with a contingency. They are the ones who in fact needed a contingency, and they didn't think to get one because they thought that they were secure in that position that they were in, that they, were doing all the things to please the people in power, and never came up with a plan, right? And their lack of self-awareness, their unwillingness to change, their just, their poor relationship with their self and self-awareness led them down a really dark path where they ended up basically removing themselves and making themselves obsolete because they weren't willing to grow, learn, and you know what I mean? So yeah, that is the dark side of external validation, because his whole sense of security was dependent on another person liking him, right? That if this person likes me enough, I can get away with anything, I can do anything because my everything is in this person. As long as I keep him happy, right? As long as I keep him thinking that all's good, as long as I jack and jive for this person, that I don't actually have to be good. I don't actually have to do the thing. I just have to get that person's validation, and that person's validation, determines my security. And one day that person, closed the tap. And the moment that tap closed, so did that person's security. Do you get what I mean? And that's never a healthy space to be in, because that's where you end up creating that room for abuse. Not to say that in this dynamic and in this scenario, it was an abusive relationship, right? But that is the danger of it all, right? The danger of it is if you do make an external thing your whole world, they become your idol, they become your God, that they then have the power to control the destiny of your life. And that's way too much power to give an external factor that you cannot control. An external factor that, you know what I mean, has no guarantees. So don't play yourself. Do not play yourself. Fill your own cup. Take some time to get to know yourself. Journal if necessary. Send voice notes. Paint. Just spend time with yourself. Romance yourself. Take yourself out on dates. Figure out how you'd like a partner to treat you, and ask yourself if that's how you're treating yourself. Do you consider your feelings? Are you compassionate? Are you caring? Are you considerate to yourself? All these things that you want someone to do for you, how are they going to ever do that if you don't even know how to do that for yourself? How will you ever have the room to receive it? Because when that person is doing these things for you, it shouldn't be to supplement your inability to do it for yourself. It should be in addition to the love and care that you give yourself. And I'm not saying you have to be perfect before you find love. I mean, we spoke about that book about, shades of blue or whatever. But even in you, like, you have to accept your own flaws, right? Before you expect someone else to accept you, flaws and all, right? How can you expect to love and be loved by anybody else if you can't love yourself? Hashtag RuPaul, right? Because eventually, the closer people get into your circle, the more they become like a part of yourself, and how you treat them becomes an extension of how you treat yourself. You neglect yourself, you abandon your relationships, you disappear sometimes, you ghost people because you ghost yourself low key. You spend long periods of time abandoning yourself, and then eventually your mind, your body crashes out, and then you need time to recover. And in that recovery period, you've now abandoned all your friends because you spent 2 weeks making them the center of your universe. And now all these internal needs have built up to the point where, they force you to crash. And now you're a bad friend, right? And you're not responding to texts, you're not doing whatever, da 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 da. Do you get what I mean? You're not kind to yourself. You lash out at yourself. You punish yourself harshly. You're overly critical to yourself. Then what do you end up doing to your friends? Right? And yes, sometimes we are kinder to the people around us than we are to ourselves. And I know that's definitely true, for me. But at the same time, I can see how my relationship with myself comes out in my interactions with other people because I don't have a healthy relationship with myself. And that's why my relationships with other people, there's always like an element of like fear in it, right? There's an element of insecurity. There's an element of, harshness sometimes. There's an element of abandonment sometimes. Because these are all the things that I'm doing to myself, and oftentimes we lash out on the people closest to us. And that lashing out doesn't always have to be like, shouting and screaming, but it could be them getting a taste of how we treat ourselves in whichever way that we do that. And that's not healthy. So for the best, for the sake of your internal environment and for the sake of your relationships, for the people who are truly in the corner of your circle, fix it. Fix it. Fix it, Jesus. Fix it. Because you never want to find yourself in a situation where you are so removed from yourself, where someone else's story of who you are is the story that you're going to buy, the story you're going to believe over the truth of who you are, over the truth of how amazing you are. Never, ever, ever let someone tell you what you can and cannot do. And the only way you can stand 10 toes down and know what is true and what is untrue of who you are and what you can do is by knowing yourself first, defining yourself for yourself. Don't let someone walk into your life and tell you what's what. Never, ever, ever. If you're going to learn anything from colonization, learn that you should always have a firm grasp on who you are, a firm and solid relationship with yourself, and never let anybody detach you from that. Because once they do, they will convince you that you aren't even worth the ground you're standing on.